I love it. I'm addicted to it. I don't know anything else.
Warning. This video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel. And today I want to talk a little bit about the confusion, at least from my perspective. I know there's plenty of people out there that seem to have all the answers, and that's fine, good for you. But for me, this represents quite a complex time, at least from a cycle perspective. So I'm going to show you everything I'm looking at. There's many different perspectives, and unfortunately, until we've seen more candles, then we can't possibly know which one of these is actually, the base case is actually in play. So all I can really do is, if you're confused, so am I, okay? But we'll get through it. We always do. It's not the first time we've had a complex situation, a complex and confusing backdrop. So I'm just going to run through these scenarios and you can see what's going on. Okay, now, objectively speaking, Bitcoin might be working on a head and shoulders pattern, and if it is, then the measured move target puts us all the way down at about 75k. Or we might just be living in a simulation. And by that, we simply mean, are we repeating this left-hand pattern? Okay, did we just complete this kind of spring yesterday? And are we now about to go off to the races, as this green fractal would suggest and imply right here? Both of these are absolutely on the table. It's always good to have a bullish and a bearish case. It's always good to be aware that we've got a downside scenario and an upside scenario. But unfortunately, where we are now is we've also got a bunch of other scenarios as well. The cycles suggest we are yet to find a weekly cycle low. Or at least if the current low is going to prove to be a weekly cycle low, we're not going to know about it until we've seen significant upside, which of course takes time. We're going to need to see more daily candles. When I said yesterday, the current price action kind of puts on the table a scenario where we've got about 2 months of chop. Many people seem kind of annoyed with me for saying that. Many people are accusing me of flip-flopping or pivoting my stance or whatever the thing was, right? But the reality is, I don't make my own decisions. The cycles make my decisions for me, right? As a cycle trader, when price action shows me something, it's the system that tells me, right? It's the cycles that tells me on a balance of probabilities, we've got to do 2 months of chop. And you can see here from Bob, he's also had this same scenario. Not because Bob thinks it, not because I think it, but because the cycles suggest we probably have to work out more time so that we can find a weekly cycle low. And the complexity is not over yet, because not only have we got a downside, an upside, and a sideways chopping scenario, but the cycles as interpreted by Erlosky suggests that we have started the Bitcoin weekly cycle decline. We have failed the cycle, and even though we've sort of been pinging up and down, and a lot of people are getting overly emotional, a lot of people are getting thrown around by the tape, the reality is, this is probably the cycle low. I completely agree with Erlosky here. Left translated and has failed as early as day 6, and it's a 60-day cycle. So there's plenty of time and scope here to see potentially a continued decline all the way into that early March timeframe. And if we were to do something like that, then it would look an awful lot like this, wouldn't it? Now again, it might not be the case, because it's entirely possible that what we do here is range around for a while, weekly cycle low, and then go. And then at that point, it starts to look a lot more like Bob Lucas's count right here with the sideways chop. This is what I was kind of suggesting we might have to do in yesterday's video. And of course, as ever, there's an outside probability that we just set a trap there. That's a day 70 cycle low, which is late, but it wouldn't be impossible. And now we're about to come screaming out of here, having just run everyone's stop. And so to kind of summarize this complexity, there are times when my read on the market is very clear, but we just so happen to not be in one of those times right now for me. For me right now, there's a lot of complexity, a lot of uncertainty, and the only way I can resolve it is to give it some space. Let some more price action show itself to me, let the market prove to me what's going on, and then as that happens, we can come back here and start to scratch some of these off. Some of these will become clearly wrong. And once they are clearly invalidated, then we will have 1 or 2 left, and it will be back to plain sailing, as we often are. So I thought I would let Bob do the heavy lifting here and give you a nice little summary. Is the Bitcoin low in? I don't know. Nobody does. But I'd say no. Sentiment is getting bearish, but permeable accounts are still saying buy this dip, and they're being vocal about it. By Bob's study, Bitcoin formed a failed daily cycle on day 14. That's early, meaning bears are firmly in control here. The weekly has broken some support. We are not that oversold yet, and we've entered an area that was covered by just 2 weekly candles on the way up. As pointed out weeks ago, which by the way was met with a lot of bull backlash, Bob's view is that we had a monster 105% weekly cycle move over the past 15 weeks, and it takes time to backfill and reset the sentiment. A downside move to 80 would be a 50% retracement and a 25% drawdown top to bottom. That would be totally normal. To the extreme downside, we could see 74k. Again, that fits with the head and shoulders target, roughly speaking, doesn't it? And it also fits with the back test of this big range break where we spent about 7 months consolidating after we printed the all-time high pre-halving. But even if we did go to the extreme side all the way back to 74k, then historically it's still well within the range of a normal pullback during a bull market for Bitcoin of just 30% top to bottom. So from this point, above 99.9k is positive, and Bitcoin should not trade back above 102.5k all the while we're in a declining phase for the cycle. Bears will be completely offside, wrong, and invalidated above 102.5k. So if I come over here, we'll turn this fractal off really quickly, and we zoom in, this is the level right here, 102.5k. We start to print a higher high, then we've got a change in market structure. We're no longer producing lower highs and lower lows, and instead we will have changed the behavior, changed the structure. We would have printed a new higher high, and at that point, if you're bearish, you are offside. But keep in mind, right, this is a bull market. So ultimately, Bob is super bullish, as I have been of late. The question is always just on what time frame. So again, lots of complexity, lots of uncertainty. No one really knows which of these 4 or 5 scenarios are correct. And the only way for us to know is to just keep open to all of them and allow some price action to play out. It is no good seeing stops run at 90k and then a nice big green candle up to 94k and jumping up and down and saying to yourself, oh, I need to ape back in here. No, they just hunted my stop. I need to just hop back in, right? That's not how it works. That's an emotional overreaction. There's plenty of time here. There's no rush. We might even be setting up for 2 months of sideways and chop. And if we do this, remember, we would expect at least somewhat of a nice drop into a swing and a reversal as we find that weekly cycle low. We also may ping around inside of this bear fork, as Airlosky shows, all the way back down to about 72, 73k. So looking at one big green candle and saying, oh, they hunted your stop, right? You panic sold the lows or whatever. It's just not going to cut it, right? You're too emotional, and you've got to learn to have more of a strategy and more of a ability to sit back and allow this thing to play out. Now, to make matters even more complicated, I have to put one more scenario on the table. Now, keep in mind, I don't do this for fun. I don't do this if I can avoid it, right? I only do this when the market is so complicated and complex and confusing that there are many, many possibilities. And we just so happen to be in one of those times because now we have to put another possible outcome on the table, different to everything I've shown you so far. Long-time viewers of the channel know, okay, this has been the fractal, this has been the expectation. And it actually goes all the way back to July. Right here, you can see 3rd of July. Fast forward to today, okay, and we might, and I don't think this is particularly likely, but we can't rule it out just yet. We might, if we do this and just come blasting out of here, have printed a very, very late day 70 cycle low. So if I get rid of this fractal and turn on some cycles. So before we do the cycles, actually, first of all, full transparency, as always, okay, I had to pay a stop yesterday because my 90k level that has been public was run. So we had to pay a small stop here. The profit from the first trade was locked in. Happy days. As I was just saying, we might have to entertain a day 70 cycle low. Now, I don't much like it, to be completely honest with you, but it wouldn't be the first time I've ever seen it. It could be another scenario where everything I presented today turns out to be wrong. And what instead happens from here is we print a day 70 cycle low, we come up here, break out, and off we go. And then if we were to turn the fractal back on, okay, it might just be a simulation repeat. In fact, it might be something very, very similar to this. And so whilst I don't much like this as an idea, it is entirely possible. It's a non-zero probability. So if we are to come screaming out of here and get a breakout, okay, and here's the important part, then close a higher high above that 102k level, we can scratch all the other ones off and say, maybe that's what's going on. But the issue I have with this is it doesn't seem like enough of a decline to reset the weekly cycle low. If it is going to come firing off from here and break out, then we would have to count this as a weekly cycle low. And I'm just not convinced that it has had enough time or decline to actually reset the weekly cycle. I also don't think there's enough fear, capitulation, top callers out there to have called this a weekly cycle low. But again, it is a non-zero probability. So in summary, right, we could be working on a head and shoulders top targeting 75k. Equally, we could have just set some kind of spring and now we're about to turbo reverse and moonshot to the upside. It's also entirely possible, and I think quite probable, that we have not spent enough time to find a weekly cycle low, and thus we've probably got to chop around into that late February, early March timeframe. Then we can get a quick, sharp drop drop into a weekly cycle low, a reversal, which is a tradable swing, and then we can look for resumption of a big rip-roaring bull market. It's also entirely possible that we have just started a declining phase. We're going to be contained inside of this pitchfork all the way down until we find a weekly cycle low, and then once again all paths do seem to lead to the upside. On a balance of probabilities, at least from a cycle perspective, we can say that sentiment is getting bearish, but it's not quite bearish enough. And remember, the only thing we know is that nobody knows, okay? Nobody actually knows which one of these is going to play out, even though there will be plenty of people out there that try to convince you they do. And of course, to make matters even more complicated, we have another scenario where we find a day 70 cycle low. It would be late, it would be outside the timing window, but remember, depending on the asset class, 70 to 80% of these cycle lows fall inside of the window, which of course means 20 to 30% of them fall slightly outside. So it wouldn't be impossible that we fall slightly outside this once. We haven't seen a cycle low outside of the window for Bitcoin in quite some time. In fact, this was the last one here where it threw a day 42, I think it was, or 43 cycle low, which was very early. But as you can see, we forced it and then off we went. So I do wonder if we might see the same thing again. As always, I'm going to keep taking it one day at a time. I'm not going to get thrown around by the tape. I'm not going to be panic buying back in here because they quote hunted my stop, okay? It just is what it is, okay? We'll sit here, and if we get a breakout and a higher high, then there'll be plenty of time to get back in. Here's how you know, right? If something like this is coming next, then even buying at 102k, right, or 103k, even buying at 108k all the way up here, which would be considered very, very late, okay, will still yield a very nice trade from a risk-reward perspective. And I would suspect that we're probably in somewhere around here if we are to confirm a breakout. So still plenty of R&R here, all right? Absolutely no rush, no FOMO, no need for any kind of emotions. One last thing I want to show you, actually. I wasn't going to show you this, but I think this is a good thing to point at. The pink count down the bottom is a 106-day count. And this is experimental, or it was at the time, and Chemo proposed this. And what we found was we run it for a while. If you focus on the 106-day arrows in pink, okay, you'll notice that we get a weekly cycle low, very, very close. 106 is the half cycle low on the weekly time frame. Then we get a 106-day, okay, into a weekly cycle low, half cycle low, right around the 106 days later. 106 days later, we get a perfect weekly cycle low. 106 days later, okay, we get a half weekly cycle low. 106 days later, we get this weird inversion into a weekly cycle low, okay? And now 106 days later, we're kind of in this neighborhood up here, okay? So on a balance of probabilities, it says to me this is way too early. Unless this is going to be the first time that it doesn't take 2 of these 106-day counts to find a weekly cycle low, then once more on a balance of probabilities, I say we haven't wasted enough time in this cycle yet to actually find that weekly cycle low. If we go down to a weekly time frame, what you'll notice is there's only 1 week's difference between the blue and the pink here, okay? There's 1 week's difference at the most. When we go over here, perfect. When we go over here, 1 week's difference. So it makes a lot of sense to me that we're going to need to spend a little bit more time on our way down to this weekly count, okay? And then somewhere in here, we'll be able to find one. But I do think it's probably too early. And I also think what you tend to see around weekly cycle lows is sentiment completely flushed to the point where people have given up on it. And right now, there's too many people screaming, buy the dip, or, ha, told you so, Camel, you just got your stop run, you need to 8 back in, okay? That's just not how a professional... That's not how a professional works. You don't get stopped out and then go, oh, I need to get immediately back in, right? That's a complete rookie thing to do. But the fact that people are telling me I need to do that shows me that we are nowhere near getting to the scariness that we had here. Okay, here, when I took this long, even I was saying to the members, it really doesn't feel good. It really doesn't feel good, and I'm operating with zero tolerance policy, okay? I don't want to see any weakness out of this cycle low. Some of the members took this with me, but many of them, when we longed this low, said, no, Camel, it's way too bearish. No, Camel, I'm going to sit this one out. Okay, that's how a weekly cycle low should feel. Again, back here, sentiment was 702 retracement, dump the whole stack, okay? Like, it's never going to an all-time high. It's never made an all-time high before the halving. What is left translation? Okay, nobody wanted to long this. No one whatsoever. And now here we are with this tiny little pullback of less than 20% top to bottom, right? 17%. And I don't see any of that. I don't see anyone saying it's over, it's topped, 108k was it, okay? I mean, 1 or 2 people, for sure, but those same people have been saying that it was the top here and here and here and here and here and here and here. So on a balance of probabilities, I say we've got to waste a bit more time. For anyone that's interested in the stock market, it still looks like it's following my yellow squiggle, so we'll find out. Gold and silver, I mean, members know what to do, right? Daily cycle low, and then we've got a whole heap of mining stocks to add to the longer term account, so looking forward to that. And the Dixie is in that neighborhood to start a declining period into a daily cycle low now, I believe. We are currently on day 25, so it's pretty overdue, I would say. We should get a flush next day or two. And it would be really nice, wouldn't it, if we can get some yields to break down, but I would not want to jump in front of any trains here. So that's it from me. And as ever, we'll take it one day at a time. No emotions, no bias. We'll just let the charts unfold. And as they prove to us which one of these scenarios is correct, we'll be able to get behind it and continue to take profit from the market over the long term. I'm your boy Camel. Have a great week. Until next time, cheers. Bye.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel Finance got the markets key. Taking a stormy